October 1942, Station 105, Chelston Airfield, England. Inside the surgical tent, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and tension. Colonel Malcolm Cummings Grow leaned over the operating table, his hands steady as he worked to remove fragments of German flak from the chest of a young navigator. The metal shards had torn through his leather jacket as effortlessly as paper through cloth. Grow's mind catalogued the familiar, grim scene. He had seen it dozens of times in recent weeks. The wound pattern told its own story. Low-velocity fragments, already spent, ripping through flesh with devastating precision. If only there had been something, anything, between the airman and the deadly fragments outside his bomber. Outside the tent, another B-17 lumbered down the runway, engines sputtering after a daylight raid deep into the heart of Hitler's Reich. In the distance, the wail of approaching ambulances signaled more casualties. The mathematics were becoming unbearable. Nearly 70% of the wounded arriving at his field hospital shared the same injury pattern. Slow-moving missiles, flak fragments tumbling lethally through the air, and pieces of aircraft torn loose by explosions. The young navigator on Grow's table would survive. Others would not. As he stepped back from the operating table, Grow made a decision that would alter the calculus of aerial warfare. These wounds were preventable. The technology to prevent them had existed for centuries. Someone simply had to ask the right question in the right place. Within months, that question would save the first of what would eventually become thousands of lives. The collapse of unprotected bomber crews had begun on August 17, 1942, when the 97th Bomb Group launched the first American heavy bomber mission of the war. 18 B-17 Flying Fortresses crossed the English Channel to strike the marshalling yards at Rouen-Sautil in occupied France. Major Paul Tibbets led 12 bombers against the primary target, while 6 others flew a diversion mission. All aircraft returned safely, but the light opposition near the French coast proved deceptively reassuring. As the 8th Air Force pressed deeper into German-controlled territory through the autumn and winter of 1942, casualty statistics painted a grim picture that contradicted every assumption about daylight precision bombing. October brought the first comprehensive analysis of 8th Air Force combat casualties. Medical officers compiled data from every wounded airman who passed through British hospitals. The results stunned military planners. They had expected German fighter aircraft and their machine guns to be the primary threat. Instead, roughly 70% of all bomber crew wounds came from low-velocity projectiles. Fragments of exploding anti-aircraft shells and pieces of the bombers themselves, torn loose by flak bursts. The deadly environment over occupied Europe was unlike anything American planners had anticipated. German anti-aircraft batteries, known as Flugabwehrkanone, or flak, had been perfected over years of combat. By late 1942, the Luftwaffe had positioned thousands of guns around strategic targets. The standard 88mm flak gun could fire shells to altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet, each carrying a timed fuse designed to detonate at a predetermined height. The result? Hundreds of razor-sharp fragments raining down at lethal speeds. Colonel Grow grasped the medical implications immediately. The analysis revealed that torso wounds accounted for the majority of fatalities. Chest injuries caused 36% of deaths among unarmored crews, while abdominal wounds added another 39%. Combined, wounds to the body core represented 3/4 of all fatalities. The mathematics were simple. Protect the torso, reduce fatalities. But the solution was not obvious. In 1942, the United States Army Air Forces had no personal body armor program. The concept had fallen out of favor after World War I, when steel vests proved too heavy for infantry mobility. Aviation warfare, however, presented different conditions. Bomber crews were already burdened with oxygen equipment, parachutes, and heavy flying suits. They operated in confined spaces, where mobility mattered less than survival. Most critically, They faced a specific threat profile dominated by slower-moving fragments rather than high-velocity bullets. Grove's surgical training gave him insight that military planners lacked: wound ballistics. A fragment from a flak shell, after traveling 200 yards from the explosion to the aircraft, had lost most of its initial velocity. Such projectiles, traveling perhaps 500 to 1,000 feet per second, could be stopped by relatively thin steel plates. The same applied to pieces of aircraft torn loose by explosions. These were not armor-piercing bullets traveling at 3,000 feet per second. They were tumbling fragments with depleted energy. In October 1942, Grove submitted a proposal to 8th Air Force Headquarters, requesting authorization to develop personal armor for bomber crews. His submission included casualty data and preliminary sketches of a vest with overlapping steel plates sewn into fabric, a design inspired by historical brigandine armor, which provided flexibility and protection. Air Force leadership was initially skeptical. Weight was a concern. Bomber crews already carried roughly 40 pounds of equipment. Could they bear the additional load? Cost, production capacity, and crew compliance were also questioned. Some argued that improving fighter escorts would be more effective than armor. Grove persisted. He proposed a limited field test: produce a small batch of vests, issue them to crews, and track casualty statistics. Let the data prove the concept. Headquarters approved the experiment, but with a critical condition: the armor had to be developed rapidly, outside normal military supply channels. Domestic production capacity was insufficient. Grove turned to the British, who had experimented with body armor for their own crews. RAF attempts had largely failed. Cramped aircraft like the Avro Lancaster made bulky armor impractical, but American bombers offered more interior space. What failed for the RAF might succeed for the USAAF. The British connected Grove with the Wilkinson Sword Company, a firm with a long history of armor and metallurgy. Founded in 1772, Wilkinson had produced swords, bayonets, and razors, but retained expertise in bullet-resistant metals. During World War I, the company had manufactured body armor for British officers. By World War II, they were producing aircraft fire suppression systems, but could adapt their skills for personal armor. Grove traveled to Wilkinson's facility with designs and medical data. The collaboration that followed was unusual. Military medicine met civilian engineering. Grove brought an understanding of human anatomy and wound ballistics. Wilkinson contributed metallurgical expertise and production know-how. Together, they refined the design through multiple iterations, balancing protection, weight, and flexibility. The final armor consisted of 3 pieces: a main vest covering the torso, front, and back, a separate apron for the lower abdomen and groin, and configurable panels for specific crew positions like ball turret gunners. Each section used 2-inch square plates of manganese steel, about 1 millimeter thick, overlapping within heavy canvas shells backed by soft cotton. Manganese steel was critical. It provided hardness to stop reduced velocity fragments while remaining thin enough for wearability. The complete vest and apron weighed 22 pounds, substantial but manageable. A quick-release mechanism allowed crews to jettison the armor instantly in emergencies, addressing concerns about bailing out or escaping damaged aircraft. By early 1943, Wilkinson had produced prototype suits for testing. Early missions showed promise. Wounded crew members arrived at field hospitals with flak fragments embedded in their vests, stopped before reaching their bodies. Lives were being saved. Colonel Grove's vision had turned a devastating problem into a solution, reshaping the survival of American bomber crews. From the surgical tents of Charleston Airfield to the skies over Europe, the introduction of personal armor marked the beginning of a new chapter in aerial warfare. A chapter where preparation, innovation, and human ingenuity turned the tide against previously unstoppable threats. By early 1943, it was clear that the thin manganese steel plates of the armor were sufficient to stop the majority of flak fragments. These fragments, having lost much of their energy traveling from the explosion to the aircraft, could no longer penetrate the vests designed by Colonel Grow and his collaborators. The life-saving effect of this innovation quickly became evident, and demand for the armor suits began to grow across the 8th Air Force bases in England. Yet production lagged far behind the growing need. Wilkinson soared in Britain, while skilled and capable, could produce only about 100 suits per month, far short of the thousands required to outfit the rapidly expanding bomber fleet. Their facilities were already committed to other war production priorities, and the need for American manufacturing became urgent. By the summer of 1943, Colonel Grow worked to establish domestic production. The War Department authorized an unusual collaboration between military arsenals and civilian manufacturers, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. The museum's armor workshop, staffed by experts in historical armor, became a research and design hub. These specialists studied 15th-century brigandines and other medieval armor, adapting centuries-old principles to modern materials and the unique conditions of aerial warfare. Stephen Grants, curator of the museum's Arms and Armor Department, later described the process in a 1945 article. He explained how museum exhibits, ranging from heavy jousting armor to lightweight battlefield designs, were meticulously examined for adaptation. The insights of craftsmen who had spent their careers preserving historical armor suddenly became life-saving knowledge for bomber crews. American production began in mid-1943, incorporating improvements based on these studies. The standardized M1 Flyers vest replaced canvas with nylon for enhanced durability and water resistance, while retaining the cotton backing for comfort. Steel plate specifications remained consistent with the Wilkinson sword designs, ensuring optimal protection. Production scaled rapidly as manufacturers across the United States began fulfilling contracts, meeting the needs of the expanding 8th Air Force. On October 5, 1943, the M1 vest was officially adopted as standard issue for all bomber crews. Every airman received armor tailored to their role. Pilots and co-pilots wore modified M2 vests integrated with their armored seats. Ball turret gunners received the M3 apron designed for confined spaces. Waist gunners received the M4 apron optimized for standing positions, and other crew members were issued M5 groin protection in addition to the main vest. This modular approach allowed each crew member to configure protection according to the specific risks of their position. Resistance to wearing armor evaporated once crews experienced its effectiveness in combat. Reports flooded back from field hospitals showing fragments embedded in steel plates rather than in airmen's bodies. By early 1944, the program expanded to include additional protective gear. The M3 helmet, or Grow helmet, provided overlapping manganese steel strips over a leather flying helmet base, offering superior protection against shrapnel compared to standard infantry helmets. Comprehensive studies by 8th Air Force medical officers confirmed the armor's life-saving impact. Analysis of 1,117 battle casualties revealed that fatalities among unarmored crews from chest and abdominal wounds were 36% and 39%, respectively. Among armored crews, these numbers dropped dramatically to 8% and 7%, a 77% reduction in thoracic fatalities and an 82% reduction in abdominal fatalities. Overall injuries also declined, with a 58% reduction in wounded personnel and a 60% decrease in total wounds. The armor could not prevent every death. Head injuries, limb wounds, and direct hits from larger caliber projectiles remained lethal. Fragments striking from extreme angles could sometimes bypass gaps in protection. Yet the armor achieved its primary mission. It reduced the most common and deadly threat to bomber crews, dramatically increasing the odds of survival during Missions over flak-laden skies. The October 14, 1943, raid on the Schweinfurt ball-bearing factories, later known as Black Thursday, highlighted both the dangers and the benefits of armored crews. Out of 291 B-17s dispatched, 60 were lost, 17 damaged beyond repair, and 121 returned with battle damage. Examining returning crews, medical officers found that armor had prevented many additional casualties. Airmen displayed vests scarred with embedded fragments, clear evidence that, without protection, the human toll would have been far greater. While the armor alone could not change the fundamental challenges of daylight strategic bombing, it worked in tandem with improved tactics. The introduction of long-range P-51 Mustang escorts allowed bombers to penetrate deep into German territory with fighter cover, reducing losses to enemy interceptors. Combined with body armor, these advances produced a dramatic improvement in crew survival rates by the spring of 1944. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June 1944, the 8th Air Force had matured into a formidable precision strike force. Thousands of aircraft conducted systematic attacks on transportation networks and German defenses. The armor program had reached full implementation, with production having overcome initial shortages. By war's end, 338,780 M1 vests and 95,919 M2 vests had been produced. The speed of implementation was remarkable. From Colonel Grove's first analysis in October 1942 to full-scale production in late 1943, just 1 year had passed, a period that included design, prototype testing, contractor selection, production scaling, and distribution. Allied cooperation was critical. British expertise in metallurgy, initial production via Wilkinson's Sword, and the supply of 9,600 flak jackets under reverse Lend-Lease all contributed to the program's success. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's involvement exemplified an unusual but highly effective partnership between historical scholarship and modern military engineering. Colonel Grove's influence extended beyond armor. He developed improved oxygen systems to reduce hypoxia at high altitudes, designed electrically heated clothing to prevent frostbite, and implemented rest homes and psychiatric support for combat-stressed crews. For these contributions, he received the Legion of Merit in July 1943 and the Distinguished Service Medal in May 1944, with citations noting the transformative effect of his innovations on both crew safety and morale. After the war, Grove continued to shape military medicine. He became acting air surgeon in 1945 and air surgeon in 1946. With the creation of the United States Air Force in 1947, he was appointed the first Surgeon General, serving until November 1949. He retired as a Major General on December 1, 1949, and passed away on October 20, 1960. At the age of 72, the legacy of Colonel Grove's work extended far beyond World War II. Korean war vests, Vietnam-era flak jackets, and today's modern ballistic armor all trace their lineage back to the modular, fragment-focused designs he pioneered. Every police officer, soldier, and civilian protected by modern body armor owes a debt to the flak vest program of World War II. 2. Colonel Grove's story contains no battlefield heroics, no cinematic last stands. Instead, it is a testament to meticulous observation, data-driven analysis, and persistent innovation. He recognized patterns in the wounds he treated, connected them to a practical solution from history, and collaborated with unlikely partners to implement life-saving technology. The flak vest program proved that protection need not be perfect. It needed only to stop the most common threats, and in doing so, it saved thousands of lives, reshaping aerial warfare forever. Decades after the war, the Metropolitan Museum of Art created exhibits highlighting the connection between medieval brigandine armor and the modern M1 Flyer's vest. A 15th-century brigandine stood beside the steel and canvas vest, illustrating how the principle of small, layered plates had been adapted from ancient armor to modern materials. Curators emphasized that the eternal challenge of protecting soldiers had found new solutions through creative application of historical knowledge. Meanwhile, the Wilkinson Sword Company returned to its peacetime production of razors and garden tools. Yet the firm retained a deep pride in its wartime contribution. Company histories devoted substantial attention to the collaboration with Colonel Grow and the development of protective equipment that saved thousands of American lives. The story of the flak vest program holds lessons that remain relevant decades later. Innovation often comes from unexpected sources. A surgical officer, not a procurement specialist, identified the problem and proposed the solution. A sword manufacturer, not a military contractor, provided the initial production capacity. A fine arts museum, not a military research lab, supplied critical design expertise. Success came from harnessing diverse knowledge, combining technical skill, historical insight, and medical expertise. Equally important was the value of data-driven decision-making. Grow's initial proposal rested on solid medical statistics. Field tests provided clear evidence of effectiveness. Expansion to full-scale production was justified by documented reductions in casualties among crews wearing armor. At every stage, decisions were based on evidence, not assumption. This rigorous approach overcame skepticism and bureaucratic resistance, proving that lives could be saved through protective technology even in lethal environments. In 1942, the conventional wisdom held that bomber operations over Germany would inevitably be bloody. High casualties were assumed unavoidable. Colonel Grow rejected this fatalism. He believed that better protection could reduce losses even if it could not eliminate them entirely. And he was right. The flak vest program became one of the most successful rapid military innovations of World War II. From initial problem identification in October 1942 to full implementation by late 1943, the timeline was astonishingly short, encompassing design, testing, contract negotiation, production scaling, and logistics. The success of the program rested on four key principles: clear evidence of need, practical solution design, effective collaboration between military and civilian entities, and unwavering support from Air Force leadership. In the annals of military medicine, Grow's work represents a triumph of systematic observation and evidence-based innovation. He saw patterns in battlefield injuries, identified preventable causes, designed practical solutions, proved their effectiveness, and persisted until his work became standard equipment. The fundamental concept established by Grow endures: identify the threat, design appropriate protection, balance weight against effectiveness, test in actual conditions, and issue as standard equipment. The mathematics of aerial warfare were fundamentally altered. Before armor, approximately 36% of crews struck by chest fragments died. After armor, that mortality rate fell to 8%. Survivability improvements changed not only tactics, but also crew psychology. Airmen who believed they had a reasonable chance of surviving flew with greater confidence. Commanders could plan more aggressive missions, knowing losses were manageable. The flak vest program also serves as a broader lesson in innovation. Bureaucratic systems can be navigated when stakes are clear. Collaboration across organizational boundaries produces superior results. Evidence-based decisions outperform assumptions. Most importantly, individuals can make an enduring difference. One determined surgeon, working with a sword company and a museum, created a solution that saved thousands of lives and reshaped how militaries think about protecting their personnel. From concept to reality, the program validated a simple yet powerful principle: careful observation, creative thinking, and persistent advocacy can overcome even the most daunting challenges when lives hang in the balance. That is the enduring legacy of Colonel Malcolm Grow's flak vest program. a testament to what one dedicated individual can accomplish with data, expertise, and unwavering commitment to the safety of those who serve.